There is an event in the Zombies storyline that isn't mentioned in the Canorium. In fact, it tells us something which, in my opinion, is quite a bit different to what actually happened. It gives you the wrong impression about an integral, or you could say the most important thing that happened as a part of the cycle. If you've read through the Canorium, which is supposed to be a complete timeline of our entire zombie storyline from World War II Black Ops 3, the cycle, it doesn't mention events about the broken cycle, which was what we learned in Black Ops 4 Zombies, but it is only through listening to a radio in BO4 Zombies that you will get this information regarding the cycle that you won't be told in the Canorium, which is weird because it makes such a big difference. And the other thing to take away from this before I tell you what exactly it is that's missing is, well, the Canorium is supposed to be a book that tells you your past, present and future, everything regarding your life. The version of the Canorium that we see in Zombies is from the perspective of Richtofen. We are viewing it from his eyes, so everything we read in there revolves directly and indirectly around him. However, if a different character was to read it, for example, Takio, then the information in the Canorium would be slightly different. A lot of it the same because all four of those characters, Richtofen, Takio, Nikolai and Dempsey, lived very similar lives past a certain point, working alongside one another. But the point I'm trying to say here is the Canorium cannot lie. It is supposed to show you information regarding your life. Every single important event that has happened or will happen should be revealed to you in the Canorium. And so the fact that this important bit of information is missing, which you can only obtain through listening to radios, the fact that the Canorium doesn't tell us this is weird and makes me wonder, what else didn't it tell us? The reason I'm making a video on this now is because I'm currently doing another entire Call of Duty Zombies storyline video from World War II, where we are right now in Black Ops 6 Zombies. I've been working on it probably for about 6 months. I stopped when BO6 came out, and I've just picked it back up again. It's nowhere near finished. I'm only about halfway through writing it, but I'm probably going to release it when Black Ops 6's story is finished anyway, so that I can have the entirety of this game's story within that video, and not just end it with speculation or on a cliffhanger, where you're not getting BO6's entire story. But as I was writing the entire CoD Zombies storyline script, that was when I was reminded of this. So take a look. If you read the Canorium at the beginning of that book, which is also the beginning of the Zombies timeline, we are told after the Great War ends on December the 31st in 1299, a day later on January the 1st, 1300, Primis disappear from history. They vanish, and then they reappear again hundreds of years later in Origins, where they reunite. That's the first thing that raises questions. They disappear for what, 600 years? That's 600 years where they aren't mentioned at all. They just disappear in 1300 and then reappear again in 1918. We weren't told if they died. You would be forgiven for assuming, well, the Great War was simply the end of the cycle. So after the Apothicons were defeated, the cycle ended and it reset and started over again in Origins. Them simply vanishing from history is a good enough reason if that's the end of the cycle. A lot of people did think back when we first saw that Revelations ending cutscene that the Great War was the beginning of the cycle and Revelations was the end of it, but it's actually the other way around. The Great War is the end of it and Origins is technically the beginning if you want to look at it like that, although due to time travel and multiple different dimensions, the zombie storyline isn't in chronological order. But technically the Great War was the end of the cycle and Origins was the beginning of it. The Canorium is the truth, or at least it's supposed to be. Everything that we read in there happened. There's no questioning in it. It can't lie. But it appears it also doesn't tell you everything, because it turns out the Primis characters after the Great War didn't simply disappear from history. They actually died, but the Canorium never mentions that once.
In my dreams of this great war, I meet a German doctor. Oddly, he reminds me of the man who once tormented me, but his face is different. When I meet him, he is angry and frustrated. He mentions a man named Dr. Monty, saying he is to blame. This German doctor, he says he believed following Monty's plan would lead them to secure a better tomorrow. This was a lie, he says. This Dr. Monty, he sent the four to the Great War. It was at this moment the German doctor said he realized the truth. Coming to the Great War did not break the cycle. It was merely the end of their loop. We will die here, he says. Then we will be reborn again. And when it is time, we will meet once more in northern France, continuing this never-ending loop. I wonder, he says, How many times have I been to the Great War? How many times have I perpetuated this endless cycle? I'm tired, he says. I have been trying so very hard to do the right thing. But for all his efforts, he had only fulfilled the prophecy of this cycle. He and Dr. Monty had forged the endless loop.
When Pablo, who was a knight that fought alongside Primis in the Great War, we know from the Canorium he was saved by Richtofen after being grappled by a Mogwai, but as a part of the broken cycle, that was when Great War Richtofen realised the truth. And he said to Pablo, he initially believed that Dr. Monty's plan would lead them to secure a better tomorrow. But that was a lie. After Dr. Monty sent Primis to the Great War, it didn't break the cycle, it was just the end of their loop. They would die here and then be reborn again when it was time, where they would meet once more in northern France, continuing the never-ending loop. So Richtofen himself tells us that he died there in the Great War, but we go back to the Canorium and that's never mentioned. It just told us they disappeared from history. And as far as we were aware, that simply could have meant they faded out of existence and then faded back in Origins. But they actually died, which actually leaves us with more questions. Well, how? What from? What killed them? The way Richtofen says coming to the Great War didn't break our cycle, it was merely the end of our loop. We die here and then we'll be reborn again later. Saying we die here makes it sound like he died at the Great War or during it, but that can't have been the case because they successfully defeated the Apothicons and banished them back to the Dark Ether, so the Apothicons can't have killed them, which is what the Great War consisted around. Primis and the Keepers versus the Shadow Man and the Apothicons. They won that battle, they didn't die during it, but Richtofen says here they died during the Great War. He could simply mean they died on this very same battlefield, but what from? Was it a different war? Could they have died because it was the end of their cycle, and technically the cycle coming to an end killed them? We don't know what killed Primis during the Great War or just after it. All we know is they died there and then were reborn again 600 years later where they reunited in Origins. So in my opinion, that's an integral part of the story which should have been mentioned in the Canorium, but wasn't. To me, there is a big difference between them simply disappearing from history, as it says, and dying. But as I also just mentioned with Pablo, him travelling back to the Great War to fight alongside Primis as a knight and helping them out actually created a predestination paradox.
Day 4721. I think I understand. I know why I am here, why I'm trapped on this rock, why I have these dreams, these visions, why I must get to this great war, and what purpose I am to serve in this cataclysmic event of the ages. I am not being sent just to witness what happened, but it is I who helps the Doctor break his cycle. Near the end of the Great War, when all hope is nearly lost, I protect him while he activates a device, a teleportation mechanism. I hold back the undead as he powers it up. I give him the moment he needs to escape his fate. I ask him, where would you go? He says, there is a prison I must travel to. Hopefully, I can intercept our friends before it is too late. Before he goes, I give him the elemental gem from the Staff of Fire. I had seen it used to vanquish great evil. He once used it to save my life. Perhaps it will serve him well on his new path. This is why I am here. It is no coincidence that I have also been left with the plans for the Agarthan device. That is how I get to the Great War. I'll need some help. But in my visions, I have seen that I will have help soon. For now, I must bide my time. For my time is coming.
This predestination paradox that Pablo created is a time travel concept that occurs when a future event causes a past event, which then causes a future event again, creating a self-reinforcing loop. It exists when a time traveller, who in this case would be Pablo, is caught in a loop of events that predestines his journey back in time. Because of the possibility of influencing the past while time travelling, one way of explaining why history doesn't change is by saying that whatever has happened must happen. And so Pablo attempting to alter the course of history would only be playing his part in shaping history as we already know it, rather than changing any aspects of the past. This is regardless of his intentions to preserve his personal experience or knowledge of events. Travelling back to the Great War is what actually caused the initial events that caused them to travel back there in the first place. And it's only when he realised this and decided to do something different the next time he was in the Great War was when he could break it. And the same goes for Richtofen, Takeo, Nikolai, Dempsey. The whole Zombies storyline was a paradox created by them. And in fact, as a part of the cycle, so in Black Ops 3, Richtofen, after reading the Canorium, found out that he knew he was in a cycle, but he continued it because it was a way for him to live forever. It's the same with Dr. Monty. Both Monty and Richtofen perpetuated the endless cycle, and both of them wanted it to keep going because the alternative is they die. So which do you choose? Do you keep the cycle going, knowing you're living in a loop of misery, but you're alive? Or do you break the cycle, which means you're no longer trapped in an infinite loop of, well, what is essentially misery, but you no longer exist? Richtofen, whether it be Primis or Ultimus, because of his personality, chose to continue the cycle, which is why, in part, also besides from the fact that he was the one who had his own soul still, when Richtofen, Takeo and Dempsey didn't, but it had to be Nikolai who was to break the cycle in Black Ops 4 Zombies, and that was also the reason why he didn't tell any of the others of what was going to happen. Nikolai read the Canorium, he knew they all had to die, but because he also knew Takeo, Dempsey or Richtofen wouldn't agree to this and could go against it, potentially foiling the plan, in secret, he poisoned them. Because he was the only one that still had his own soul, that also meant he was the only one that was unselfish enough to do the right thing, end his life along with his friends, in turn ending the multiverse and giving the two children, Samantha and Eddie, the chance of a better life, instead of them being trapped in this endless loop with them. I just thought this was interesting because this is something that should have been mentioned in the Canorium, right? Richtofen, Takeo, Nikolai and Dempsey dying during the time of the Great War, in my opinion, is vastly different to them simply disappearing from history. And it leaves us with even more questions. How did they die? Did that being the end of the cycle kill them, or was it something more physical? So there we go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, hopefully you've enjoyed the video today. If you have, drop a like rating. Make sure you are subscribed to stay up to date with the latest content on the channel. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.